not going to waste time chitter-chattering. I would love to get to your questions, any of the questions you have about your specific ideas for any of the panelists. I'd just like to open the floor. If you feel you need the mic, I'm happy to run it around the room.
Maybe I'll make a suggestion. I would love to, if there are folks for whom...
David, I'm working with Hoop Fund, and I'm interested to learn from your perspective a bit what the difference is between fundraising and crowdfunding, and to anyone who'd like to answer.
So I'll take that. I don't know if you're in the first session, but I answered that a little bit earlier. But many people think of online crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter or Indiegogo as crowdfunding. So what I would say is that those are online platforms that can be very helpful to you in systematizing and automating a fundraising and or financing process. So if you are trying to raise gift money from people, if you're trying to raise donations for your business or even for your nonprofit, then you can use these online crowdfunding platforms to support you in that process. And so what this would look like is you're trying to raise a specific amount of money, you put your video and your flashy description on the crowdfunding platform, and then you use social media and old-fashioned media, phone, direct mail, whatever, to get everyone that you know and then everyone they know to give gift money to your campaign in exchange for a reward. So, if you give $100, I'll send you a postcard and sign it. If you give me $250, we'll give you a brick in the new building that we're building with your name on it. If you give us $1,000, I'll cook you dinner, that sort of thing. So it's a typical donation-based fundraising campaign that you're using an online crowdfunding platform to support you with. You can also use these online crowdfunding platforms to support you in a pre-sale campaign, to pre-sale product. So they say you're a new business, you have designed this thing, but you can't afford the manufacturing right away, so you pre-sell a whole bunch of these things. Mary had a great example of that with the...
State laws, pre-selling could be considered selling a security. So even though a lot of people are doing this successfully on Kickstarter, I would say that they are taking some risk, because if you're pre-selling something that doesn't exist yet, under California law and several other state laws, it could be seen as a security, and you could get in trouble for offering it without doing a full securities registration. So just be careful before you get all excited about doing a pre-selling.
And I would say it's riskier if you are a brand new business that doesn't have any history of sales yet, crowdfunding through pre-sales for a product that doesn't exist yet.
And so just to answer that question again and to give a little bit of recap, I think it's all, what we're talking about here is all fundraising, right? It's all different ways to raise money. That's how I think of it very broadly. And there are many, many different ways to run a crowdfunding campaign and use crowdfunding. They're both fairly broad terms. And the previous session, we basically looked at different examples where people are using pledges for different rewards, and maybe those rewards are in the form of product. So we were talking about in the terms of gifts.
Could you provide the audience kind of you're really great at framing what someone should think legally before they embark on it. So, the legal framework, what one might want to budget in the way of putting together a legal vehicle, if you will, so that they don't get themselves in trouble, because I think the flip side of all this is the banking industry would love it to fail, and so the more kind of failure that's out there in the form of people taking people's money and running with it kind of works against the movement.
It's really hard to generalize. That's why you figure out what are your options within the law. Other people will just say, you know what, I think the chance of me getting caught is so low, and I know I'm going to be successful. I'm just going to go for it, and I'm not going to worry about it. And there are some people that have raised money in ways that weren't totally legal, but everyone's happy because the investors are getting paid back and the business is doing well. And so that's a choice also that you have to make, because I would guess that probably 90% of capital raising that happens in this country is done illegally. But you have to think about, is it worth it to you to take that chance? I would recommend obviously not doing that. One reason is that even if you don't get caught doing it the wrong way, If you want to raise more money in the future and you're looking at more sophisticated investors, they pretty much will not invest if you can't show that you did everything legally from the beginning, because they don't want to buy a lawsuit. But if you think, you know what, my business is never going to go for that kind of investor anyway, then it might be okay, but it's a decision you have to make.
Statement for people, entrepreneurs in the room, that one of the biggest mistakes I see in business plans is that new entrepreneurs think that they're going to need less and less capital as their revenue increases. And exactly the opposite takes place. You should build your business plans with the assumption you're going to need forever more and more capital. Hewlett-Packard and Bank of America and General Motors have not stopped bringing in new capital. They're bringing in more now than they used to. So you want to build your business plan that way. Question to Elizabeth and to Arno. I've just changed my whole business structure in order to be able to bring local investment money to local businesses, to private equity, direct investment, and that sort of thing. And I hear Arno is building a structure to facilitate that sort of thing. And you, Elizabeth, are saying, if you're an entrepreneur, you shouldn't be going out there and getting equity capital. You shouldn't be going out there and trying to get private equity investment.
It depends on what type of entrepreneur you are and what your business goals are and what your temperament is.
Good.
So I'm not discounting it wholesale. I'm just saying if you are going to, be very clear why, and that make sure you know it's a good
Okay.
choice.
Speaking about from the investor point of view for a moment, please, would you speak a little bit more to that in a little more detail, please? Elizabeth.
So you want me to answer that from the investor's perspective?
Thinking about the investor's perspective, I'm sorry, you're recording this. Thinking about the investor's perspective, it's our interest to bring money to local entrepreneur businesses. What should, I'd like to know a little bit better about what these distinctions are when people should not come to investors and when they should. What would be some of the distinctions that would make a difference?
Okay, so for one, I think you might be making a distinction between investors as in equity investors versus investors who are giving loans to businesses. So if you weren't in the first session, I talked briefly about the difference between debt versus equity capital. Debt meaning you've lent, debt involves a loan of some kind. It could be a line of credit, it could be credit cards, it could be...
On the share of your business is a very interesting thing. It's like Gad Restaurant here in the building. They have like 60 plus shareholders, and boy, do you think how they keep that restaurant running? I mean, this restaurant is like full every night of the week because there's so many people interested that it does well. So like shareholder can be a very interesting concept. There's some slow money in Gad Restaurant as well.
If you share values.
Yeah. The second type of financing that we have seen is straightforward loans to buy that product because it's a good product and you get a share of the revenues. And
well, we certainly can't eat that product.
Yeah, they will actually sell edible credit as well, but that's again, this is like more in the low. So the word poop is not like really in the same sentence to be used with edible, right? But royalty financing is like an interesting thing in between equity investment and loan investment. What we saw is the equity investments. Last comment, they have been the first go-to approach for most enterprises, and then we find out, oh, it's really complicated. Lots of people are really scared because they don't really understand like the cost structure of a farm with the tractors and operators and seed and all this. And they think that they need to familiarize themselves with the cost structure in order to be then being reimbursed based on profit. And so we found these deals are very hard to make. But we have some proposals on the table where it's like $3 million for a slaughterhouse in Petaluma. That probably will have to have an equity component.
Said before, all of these different models are fundraising models, and we want to be clear that we're kind of jumping into a lot of different crowdfunding solutions and different, unique financing ideas, but it still starts with the entrepreneur or the organizer or the innovator. You all have to start with a great business or concept or idea that you can find a crowd to get behind. And what we're talking about is which crowd. We've jumped ahead to what kind of repayment do you want to offer, right? No money is free money, I think we all want to make that clear, and we're really just talking about what are all of your different repayment options, right? So if you're
the least plugged-in group of business people you can conceive of. In fact, many of them don't even operate any business-wise at all regularly using email, so incredibly unplugged. And my question to you is, does pursuing crowdfunding, is it predicated on being plugged in, on taking advantage of web-based tools, of being aware of and proficient in social networking, and what are your suggestions around that for a population of very entrepreneurial, very self-reliant business people who don't necessarily feel comfortable in that zone?
I'd like to respond to that because I don't know how many people were not in the first session. Oh, so it was quite a few. Okay, so that brings up an important issue in terms of this legislation that's pending. So just to give a quick recap on that, there's something passed the House called HR 2930, the Entrepreneur Access to Capital Act, and it's now stalled in the Senate, and there's some Senate bills that are different from the House bill. So the House bill would allow entrepreneurs to raise money from their community, and they could either do it totally offline, just knock on their neighbors' doors, put a sign up in the window, whatever, or they could use a web-based crowdfunding platform. They would have the choice, either one. And I think that is really good because a lot of people are not super plugged into the internet. If you live in a small community, it just seems really silly to me that you would have to go online to raise money from people right next door, And
they take a cut, those platforms.
Right.
That's how they keep the lights on. You pay them.
And some of them are really awesome, like Hoop Fund. But some of them are just, I really see dollar signs in the eyes of a lot of people really looking forward to this bill, this legislation passing Congress.
Different digital access, digital divide questions in the various communities that we would be working, both on the urban level and the rural level. I think there are certainly those challenges. But I think there are also unique ways that can tap into different technologies, including smartphones, and so many folks are online in that way nowadays. And so how can we create different ways for community members to essentially vouch for, endorse, and help a community campaign really get off the ground? And certainly for an urban farmer or a local farmer, like that might be difficult. We understand there are some initial barriers, but we also see a lot of different ways to participate. We also see a lot of folks getting online. Even like the Greenhorns is a newer nonprofit, kind of based around young farmers going back to the earth. A lot of these folks are college educated and said, you know what, I really need to go back to my family farm or start my own or lease some land or get a little plot. And these folks are really, really sophisticated, and they've got really incredible videos, and they are on social media, and so we're certainly looking for early adopters for our online crowdfunding platform. And where there's not some easy access online, we're looking for community partners to really help spread the word.
And in the field of education, the return on investment is the future of our children, right? So I guess what I want to ask is, when you were describing what kind of rewards could be offered, we're thinking about launching a Kickstarter campaign to restore a program that we had during the school day at a low-income public school to teach cooking, nutrition, and environmental education. We've lost that program due to funding cutbacks. So you almost made it sound like, started to sound like a variation of a raffle to me. If we can get community institutions or businesses to contribute rewards to give for donors, is that what you were
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, so we're kind of helping to envision like a social tech meets your community bake sale or your commercial, more of a commercial scale raffle. So getting a lot of different institutions, merchants to pitch in to help this community entrepreneur that's ultimately going to benefit many others in that community or maybe specifically that school.
And I would suggest in terms of like some of the top tips for running an online crowdfunding campaign, tapping into that sense of scarcity. So, maybe you only have, the first donors at the $500 level will get X, Y, Z, but after that, sorry. And people have used this for pre-sales as well. They say, if you give $75, now the first 100 people who do this are going to get XYZ perk, but then the second group of folks, you're going to have to pay more to get that same level of reward. So there's ways to do it that, you know, get at people's sense of scarcity or give a sense of urgency to it. Really controversial. Maybe I'll say some things along those lines, but one of the, I mean, I really feel for your position as a financial advisor, and I think that that is one of the bottlenecks in a lot of these community investing and community financing solutions, because there's also no way for a lot of these opportunities we've talked about here that a financial advisor is incentivized. So for most financial advisors, they get some kind of kickback in some form, usually to funnel money into some of the traditional Wall Street type investments and some of the traditional brokerages. So I really applaud you for being a pioneer in your field and even taking on the role of advocacy. I mean, the majority of financial advisors I talk to are saying, my clients want me to do this and I'm not sure how, and they're scared. As opposed to, I would like to talk my clients into doing that, so A+ for effort in that corner. But I think, you know, one of the problems that you've highlighted also is this sense that people have, again, to get back to this concept of the different forms of capital and money and what does that mean and what role does it play in our lives. People and institutions, and I mean, foundations do this a lot and it drives me absolutely bonkers. They have this sense of like, yes, there's a gift or there's a grant, and then there's this thing called the mythical market rate return, and there's nothing in between. So I think as a responsible investor, I should want to have the full range of investment opportunities available to me, everything from a gift to, you know, I lose 90% of my money, to I lose 75%, to I lose, you know, but I am not being offered that by any financial institutions. I mean, I haven't even seen an investment offering that says, I will give you back 50% of what you invested in my company. But like, why isn't that possible? I can give you a gift on Kickstarter, or I can ask for 3% return. I mean, the federal, talking about securities laws or federal laws that you may or may not know about, if you charge too little interest, there is a chance that you can get yourself and your investors into trouble because they have this thing called the, what is it, applicable federal rate and imputed interest, and suddenly they can say you actually did get paid that interest, but you gave it back as a gift to your investor, and then, you know, suddenly there's all these tax implications, and it's crazy. So
Looking at different, you know, financing vehicles for mission-driven organizations, companies, entrepreneurs, organizers, and so that's our bias. And you know, so there are certainly a lot of different ways that entrepreneurs get that support, but there are also a lot of ways that investors are building that, you know, community in order to help meet that demand. And Slow Money is certainly one of those sources. Investor Circle is another network that we mentioned, and Elizabeth and I have both spent time there. RSF Social Finance, like there's a lot of great leadership within the Bay specifically.
I mean, there's one thing that Elizabeth brought up that also completely ticks me off. That's actually how foundations often work. Foundations basically have to give 5% of their assets away every year. So they have basically the 95% is being managed by money managers, and usually in the stock market trying to grow the pool because so that the 5% can be given away. But often what happens is that then people use the 5% to support some local food stuff, for example, right, or other stuff, and then they have the 95% in the mainstream stuff. So there are situations where they have like the 95% or part of the 95% in Monsanto, right, and then you try to do something with 5%. So we're really we want to get to the 95%. We really want to change that overall model. I don't think we can build really good sustainable communities if we just focus on how we can good grant applications and good proposals to get a chunk of the 5%. We need to get to the 95%, and that's, I think, the work that we have cut out for us.
I'm here again, I apologize. Are you looking only at food businesses? Because I am a manufacturing startup, and creating jobs and having a ferocious time appealing to traditional funders, and it's a manufacturing that needs you know, significant upfront capital. So we're looking at our options. So anyway,
so I'll take both of those quickly in reverse order. So
okay.
The first answer, I mean, my first answer to your second question is that no. I mean, a lot of these financing opportunities are that we've been talking about are available to any type of business. If it's a food-focused crowdfunding platform, maybe not the best fit for you, but crowdfunding is still an option. Part of why these panels often gravitate toward the food world is that there's so much innovation happening in the financial world around food-based businesses, and I think that's where people have really gotten the concept of local before they've gotten it in terms of other sectors, but there are many other sectors that focus on the community level. So the world is your oyster. That's what I'll say for question number 2. And then question number 1, a donor-advised fund, for those of you who are not familiar, is a way to basically set up a family foundation or a private foundation without actually going through the legal trouble of setting up a foundation. So you set up a donor-advised fund at usually a community foundation. So I want to tie this into the conversation we were having previously. Where you have set up your donor-advised fund affects what your options are in terms of investing that money. It's philanthropic money that you've parked at some institution, and then that institution invests that for you while you're sitting around waiting to decide where you want to grant it out.
Fan of hers for a long time, and I've been really wanting to do a tour based on this concept of shared solutions, which she'll tell you about. So I'm really very honored to be able to share the stage or to moderate this with Janelle, who I have deep respect for. And so Janelle is a sharing lawyer based in Berkeley that specializes in helping communities learn about or work with sharing houses, cars, cooperatives, launch urban farms, and form social enterprises. She's also director of the Sustainable Economies Law Center in Oakland with Jenny Casson, and is co-author of this wonderful book, Sharing Solutions. So it's my honor to introduce Janelle Orsi, and I'm going to step back and watch the new presentation.
Okay, thank you, Marissa. So I am a lawyer. You're probably wondering, why is this lawyer drawing all these cartoons? And the reason is that every now and then I can almost just picture how we're going to change the world and how it is actually going to be awesome. And I thought, well, I just need to share that visualization with other people, because I think we all need to visualize what a better world could look like. And what it looks like is kind of a major change in plans for everybody. So we've all sort of been taught to have this plan in life. The plan is that when you grow up, first of all, you're going to make a livelihood. And this is a definition I found on the Google dictionary or something. It's kind of awful, actually, what livelihood is to us these days. It's, if you break it down, it's the work you do or the job that you have that gives you money that you then take to the store so that you can buy the things that you need. And it's kind of like this perpetual circle we're in. Go to work, get money, go to the store, buy the things we need. And the goal is we're going to make a lot of money. Gonna get a car, gonna get a house, gonna fill that house with everything we could ever need, including things like a vacuum cleaner. And the whole goal is to basically live in a vacuum. And if we could accumulate all of this stuff, then we would be fine. That's how we're gonna be fine in the future. And when I was a kid, I was totally fine with this plan. I read Sunset magazine avidly. I could picture my whole life. So it seemed like a good plan. But then something has come along lately that's beginning to kind of eat away at our ability to base our whole plan for the future on that accumulation of wealth. And what we have now is this situation. And the situation is that, well, we've based our whole economic system on a system of perpetual growth, and we've used up the planet's resources faster than they can be replenished. And so yeah, so that's the situation. And of course, you can see what it's doing to the Earth. I love Google Earth because it has all these features where you can like click on things. There's one where you click and you can see how the Earth is feeling today. And it's not good. And then you can actually zoom in and sort of see why. And you can see what it's doing to us, the people. I mean, this is how we live. And if you zoom in even more, you can see, well, here's our neighborhoods. And even if your neighborhood doesn't look like this, this is kind of a metaphor for how we're all sort of trying to live. And basically what we're doing is we're all kind of trying to live in these little boxes. And there's even a green one, and a pink one, and a blue one, and a yellow one. And just to sort of show you what's going on here. So everyone, there's these fences kind of dividing people. These different households, they have kids, but they might not know each other, especially kids who live behind each other don't tend to know each other. So you have like redundant swing sets. Everybody's got a grill. Everybody's got 2.3 cars per the national average. That's why that person up there is still looking for parking. And yeah, so they're all kind of, just living in their little boxes. But then what you can't see from this picture is that every house is so full of stuff, and the garage is so full of stuff that people were kind of afraid to open the door. So then they got these sheds. You can see some of these neighbors have these sheds where they can store their extra stuff. So yeah, kind of every house is trying to live in a vacuum, and there's a vacuum living in every house. And this is sort of the state of how we live. And of course, the impact on the planet is bad. The impact on us is pretty heavy. And this whole plan that we had for the future is kind of what's causing it to begin with. So now we have this situation where we realize, well, that plan's not going to work. And we kind of just need to abandon that plan and adopt something else. And I know there are people in the audience who are kind of thinking, well, but maybe I could pull off that plan because I need those things. I need those things to survive. And I know you're thinking that because I think that at least 10 times a day there's this little voice in my head that says, Janelle, you need to make more money or you're going to die. And it's like this, our reptilian brain back there that's just responding to fear and making us feel like, oh, there's no other solution. We just need to accumulate wealth. And and that's not just the voice in my head, it's sort of the voice of conventional wisdom that says, Janelle, you're a lawyer. You should walk around, act important, and tell everyone you're worth $400 an hour, and things like that. But then I realized, no, because there is a different way, and it's totally possible, and not only that, it's going to be way better and way more beautiful. And so I do think that there's this other part of my brain, the more intelligent part of my brain, that's ready to say, that was just a silly old plan. Because I think we can be creative, innovative, and audacious enough to build a whole new economy based on sharing. So here's what it looks like. First of all, back to the neighborhood. So here's one thing that they could start doing. And fruit sharing to me is kind of a metaphor for all of the ways that we kind of just need to break the ice and start providing for each other. And I used to have this plum tree. As you can see, one neighbor has a plum tree. I used to get about 500 plums per summer, and then I would try to eat them all myself, and that was not a good idea. So I started sharing them with my neighbors, and it was amazing how that breaks the ice with your neighbors, And so here are these neighbors. They're beginning to share a few things. It broke the ice. They got to know each other. Now wow, look, they took down the fence. And now they have like this huge parkland for a backyard, and they're doing more things together. Now they've got this area in the yard where they share meals, and they've gotten down to 2 grills. So getting rid of some of the redundant stuff. They got rid of a redundant swing set, and the kids play together now. And they're sharing garden space, growing food for themselves, and they're sharing chickens, and chicken sharing is funny. Everyone is always thinking about sharing chickens, and I talk about sharing all the time, and chickens always come up. And at first I was like, why chickens? And then I realized, well, chickens, in a way, they're kind of a metaphor for what we all need to do to implement more sustainable practices. Things like gray water recycling and renewable energy and rainwater